Welcome to today's Awesome Marriage Podcast with Dr. Kim and Nancy Kimberling. I am so excited today to be hosting Gabe and Rebekah Lyons. Rebekah has authored several books. Now she's teamed with her husband, Gabe, for their newly released co-authored book, The Fight for Us. They live in Franklin, Tennessee. They have 4 kids together. Let's head to the studio so you can meet the Lyons for a great interview. Well, Gabe and Rebekah, welcome to the Awesome Marriage Podcast. I've been looking forward to this. The day we're recording this come out later, but this is launch day for you guys. So it's really exciting to be with you guys on the day, the launch of the new book. So thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having us. This is an honor and a joy.
I know. I told Rebekah, we were preparing this morning. We're going to learn from you today, I think. So we're thankful for what you do for marriages, and the more we've been in the last 7 or 8 years in this space, we just know how much hunger there is for conversations around marriage. So thanks for all that you've done to bring that to the fore for people.
Absolutely. And you said that I think I see more of a hunger now than I did maybe 10 years ago. Maybe COVID had affected to do that. I don't know what, but I do see a hunger, and couples that are struggling really want to work to figure this out instead of just saying, okay, I'm done, walk away from it.
Right.
So I love that about it. So Rebekah, let's start with you. You've written books on your own in the past. What got you to the point of wanting to write this book together with Gabe?
It's kind of been a topic that's been on the back burner for a long time, and we've never co-authored a book. And we thought, well, if we were to ever do something, it's got to be something that's deeply personal to both of us. And so it felt like, the jury's out on a parenting book. I don't know that I would ever be ready to write that. But at least 28 years into marriage, we are still in process and we're learning every day. But the Lord has taught us a lot through trial, through adversity. And I'm a chronic oversharer, and Gabe's, tolerated that for a long time. And he always has veto power when he edits my books. But this one, I thought, let's try to be as honest and vulnerable as we can, to just tell the whole story as comprehensively as we can, so that people don't have some tainted picture that like some people just have it all together, because we don't. And it's been a lot of struggle and a lot of trial. Sure. And I want to normalize the fact that, there's conflict in marriage, but the bigger part is the repair and staying together and fighting for each other. And so we just felt an equal mutual burden for us, and the publisher was open to us doing it together. And that just kind of gave us the green light.
That is so cool. I love that. And I think, I think sometimes Nancy and I, people will say something to us, and I think I'll tell them, our marriage isn't perfect. It never has been perfect. Sometimes I think we had to do a video and we had to just fight and post that, so people will realize that we've come a long way. But we won't be perfect in this life together, and that's kind of, to me, that's kind of the fun of marriage too. Is that there's you can always grow. You never reach this plateau and you just stay there, or if you do, I think you start slipping backwards.
Yeah, that's true.
You got to keep working at it.
Well, so that's why
go ahead.
That's why we called this book The Fight for Us, because it felt apropos to our relationship, like that involves some intensity, lots of opinions, and those things that you mentioned, that over life you just start to work through, and you realize like this never goes away. And I find for a lot of couples, they could easily be discouraged alone thinking about what their relationship's like, but we've drawn so much encouragement from those who've come before us, like you, who say, hey, no, it's normal that conflict's going to happen. We're two good-willed human beings who are trying to do life together, and that's just going to create friction. And I think for a lot of young couples to just know that that's okay, and that what the important thing is how do we work out those differences? How do we respect and honor and love one another through difference? That's the big growth that I know for our marriage in the last decade has just made all the difference.
And the title came from a fight, actually, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, right around the time we were wrestling through a title, we had a couple ideas, but nothing had really hit. And we had kind of just, a disagreement right around bedtime, going to bed. And we kind of have this rule that whoever apologizes first wins. So I remember that particular night. Gabe apologizes a lot, but this night I did. And I just said, I just want to keep fighting for us. And Gabe immediately goes, that would make a great book title. So it's a real test case. It worked.
Yeah, that's awesome. So early in the book, you talk about the different expectations that you both brought into marriage. So Gabe, what was it hard for you to feel like you couldn't get it right and your expectations different than Rebekah's?
Yeah. I think those first few years, especially growing up in a Christian home in an environment where there was a lot made about, getting married, like the big point of marriage. We grew up in this environment that emphasized, oh, you get to have sex. Like you wait for marriage to have sex. And that's going to be a big feature of marriage. And I think for me as a young guy, that was very exciting. But then you get married and you realize this is not what we do all day. Okay. We have to live 99% of our life not having sex and just enjoying one another and cultivating a relationship. And that comes very natural for Rebekah. And I think for a lot of women to focus on that emotional connection and intimacy. But because of some past trauma in my life, that wasn't natural for me. And so what happened for us was we went on a journey together where God used her to really help me cultivate an emotional awareness and an ability to access emotions that for me had not been easy. And through counseling and help and support of friends and her, that started to open up a new layer in our marriage that ultimately allowed me to share those expectations in a way that we're honoring, while also her being able to grow in her own emotional awareness. Because, we talk a lot about this and you've seen this too, like you tend to marry your emotional equivalent, when you're young, and you don't always realize that, but like she had a lot of growth to do in some areas and I did too. But I feel like she got a head start and I was a little stunted and it took me a while to catch up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that too. And talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's something I see so much in counseling where a husband, it's just so hard for him to get in touch with his emotions. And sometimes a wife can kind of help with that, like Rebekah did. But for you, as you went through that, what was the barrier in getting in touch with those emotions?
Well, I grew up in an environment that was all about the power of positive thinking. It was, hey, if anything's negative or sad, you move on from that because that's how you're going to be successful in life. And while that worked great in my young career, it works great for a lot of business professionals, in the workplace. They just kind of shut it down and they keep going forward. It's a horrible principle to try to apply in your marriage. And I didn't know that. And so I think for me, it was starting to unpack like, hey, my relationship with Rebekah has to be very different and has to go deeper than how I grew up thinking it was okay to just ignore emotions. And so for me, that barrier, and I talk to a lot of men who have this same barrier, and I don't know that we feel or are as aware of our emotions as our wives are a lot of times. I think God's just uniquely made women to just experience things, quickly assess. I mean, sometimes it's very intense and intimidating when I'm talking to Rebekah and we're having a conversation and she's accessing these emotions and language for it. And I'm like, I do not have those words right now. Help me. Like, I wish I could think that way and feel and see it that deeply. And so I think for a lot of men to understand, hey, that's okay. This is a difficult thing for some men to access and to understand, but to have a patient wife, and this is where Rebekah and any wife that's listening to this can encourage their husband, her creating like a safe place for me to explore that, to kind of trip over myself with my words, sometimes not say it correctly or always even understand what I was thinking, to be able to process with her. She would even help me start to understand what I was going through. And that counsel from my wife in a very safe, secure place helped me start to feel like more confidence, like I can explore these emotions. It's okay.
Yeah, I think 99% of the couples I work with, the wife does get it. And she, wants her husband to come alongside her in that. I think where I see a lot of guys, Gabe, get messed up is at work, what they do, they're very successful in it. And people think, you're great. You're the best boss I ever had. And they get home and they try to do the same thing there. Well, I didn't have to deal with my emotions at work. Why do I have to do it at home? And it doesn't, like you said, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Right. That person's the closest one in your life. And so a wife or a husband is a mirror, and you're going to see parts of yourself that are not healed, that are not whole. And those things are going to be reflected when there's a disconnection or there's a disagreement or a distancing, because it isn't always that the wife will reject the husband because he can't access his emotions and therefore not be in tune with hers. But she might just slowly drift or grow distant or shut down because she'll just feel like, oh, my girlfriends are the only place I can take my heart. My girlfriends, or maybe even a child, which starts to get really awkward with triangulation, right? To have our kids even be our emotional buffer because our spouse isn't able to. That's not healthy at all. But we're all longing to be seen and known and loved fully in the absence of shame. And women are going to just keep hunting that down until they find it. And men want that too. I just don't think they're they're not conscious of that often. They would rather probably prefer, maybe they want to be seen and known and loved, but they'll settle for being admired or respected.
Yeah.
Or revered. But that intimacy really can only happen in a marriage. And it takes some time to break those walls down. And also, I think a lot of men come into it with a little bit of resistance. And part of that's origin story, so his father would be more resistant to initially like an expression of emotion, whereas my father was very emotive. He was the youngest of 3 girls. So he saw a lot of emotion growing up, and that was a little more normalized, where his dad only had one brother and didn't have a lot of modeling of expression. So I really think a lot of it does have to do with the way we're raised, what we're kind of hardwired to see as normal. And then we come into a marriage where that looks very different for me than it does for him, and even in a male figure. And so trying to figure out, okay, it's not that it's right or wrong, it's different, but there is something that can be unpacked there through the two of us.
Yeah, that's a big part of our encouragement, even in this book, and the projects we're doing around it, is encouraging people to talk. We believe you're not healing unless you're talking. And for a lot of couples, some of these conversations have become off limits because they don't know how to have them, or they haven't gone so well. And a lot of husbands walk away and go, man, it wasn't worth it for me to unpack my emotions. I feel more disconnected than ever. And so we're just going to give each other the silent treatment, or kind of avoid the conversation. And we have found when couples are brave enough and courageous enough to turn towards one another and have these conversations, and we give them actually these conversations for couples at the end of each chapter to make it simple, to say, hey, ask this question to your spouse, just 15 minutes, and have a conversation about this, your origin story, how you were raised, how you viewed emotion growing up.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be amazing if you had that conversation, and then to say, without judgment, how is that impacting us right now?
Yeah.
And how can we grow together in that?
Yeah. And try not to reject or interrupt their answer.
No, I think that it's so good. And I think as guys, it's taking that risk to do that. And I think for most guys, it is a risk because you're not sure how it's going to go. But I think whatever you guys saying, just persevere. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take time, most likely. Family of origin has such a huge impact because at some point in our life, that was it was our normal, but we also took it as almost gospel. This is the way a family is supposed to be. Or maybe it's a little off, but that's what you're supposed to do as a man. And then you marry someone like Rebekah that is in touch with their emotions and wants a husband that wants to come alongside her in that. It's like, we just hit a brick wall. What do we do now?
Yeah. And you can feel intimidated as the man who doesn't know how to access it, as I was saying. And there's a decision to make. Am I going to just say, hey, this is going to be how it is, and we're going to just get along and it's status quo? Or am I going to do everything I can do to grow, to become more of the man that's going to help her access at the deepest level who she is? And she does the same for me. It's not one-sided. It's not just me pursuing her. She's had a lot of growth in areas that I needed a wife to come alongside me in her encouragement, affirmation. And, it's been beautiful to kind of see how God's used marriage to help shape both of us into just better people who hopefully look more like Jesus, which is why we can work through the things that we work through, because it's not just about us and our marriage. It's about our relationship with God as experienced through one another. And that's been a helpful perspective and frame to have, especially later in these last many years than we probably didn't have in those early years.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes total sense. I want to go back to something you said, Rebekah, when you were kind of talking about the emotions and women go to their girlfriends, because I think most women have girlfriends that they can talk to, that get the emotions, that they can interact with. And sometimes it's risk. I've seen women who've tried with their husband and it just didn't work. He wasn't ready, whatever. And so they almost don't want to try again because it was so hard, or I got stonewalled, or he made fun of it, or whatever. And but what would you say to women like that? Because I think I don't want them to give up.
Yeah, no, that was me. I mean, I've done that plenty. And that's when it gets dangerous, I think, if it becomes a pattern that you don't even try, because you make agreement with the phrase, it is what it is. And that's really just agreement with a resignation, like just resignation. Like our marriage is only going to be this much, like of a connection. I'll deal with it. We'll make the most of it. We'll be good parents or good grandparents. We'll stay together in covenant because we believe that's what God has called us to do. But we don't have passion. We don't have connection or intimacy. And we can live separate separate lives under the same roof. And that we see that a lot, especially in the church, because people aren't going to walk away from covenant, but they've actually walked away from intimacy. And I don't think God calls us to covenant without intimacy. Like, the whole point is that you become one, and you're supposed to there's supposed to be some friction there that humbles you, that brings you back to the foot of the cross, that brings you back to apology and repentance and forgiveness. So I would just say, in those years where I found myself crying to my girlfriends about my marriage with Gabe, it took the Holy Spirit, quite frankly, because it went from the agreement to it is what it is to I don't think I can do this. And that's a slippery slope of just the heart shutting down. When a woman begins to stonewall a husband, that's far more dangerous even than a man, because she's just shutting off her heart. And a woman, that's really hard for a woman, because she can't not care. She wants this so desperately, but she's given up. And a lot of times it is because she was dismissed, like you said, or she was made fun of. Like, get over it. You need to go work on that. Why is this such a big deal to you? And so there's just such a disconnect. I can understand and empathize with why she stops trying. But it really took the Holy Spirit to go, like, are you seriously, like, walking away it from on a heart level? Like, maybe you're not, like, going to divorce, but you have decided you're going to separate yourself from him. And sin separates. It's the whole goal of sin is to separate and break relationship. And so it's a very crafty way, I think, the enemy can do that in a Christian marriage. It's just get you to buy that lie that, like, as long as it looks okay on the outside, but inside we're just living separate lives. And so I think the Lord just convicted me of my even agreement in those phrases, but then also Jesus talks a lot about the outside of the cup looking clean, but the inside is wicked. And that's the Pharisee, right? That's the spirit of the religion. And I just felt convicted to go, like, if we're going to be in this, we need to be all in, and we need to make sure that with integrity, even in front of our kids, that we're fighting for this. Like, and so it took just a lot of, there was a moment I remember when Gabe and I were having a fight several years back, and he said he just saw it in my eyes, and I was like, I'm done. Like, I don't know how to do this. There was a desperation, and thankfully it just came out in a way that he could see it for the first time and maybe really hear it. And he wasn't casual about it. He knew that I wasn't bluffing. I was truly kind of just in this despair spiral and shame was a big part of it. And I had no idea how to process that well with him, but he came after me. And I think that was really a turning point for us, because he was like, wow, if I don't try to meet her here, like, I'm going to lose her heart. And it's already on its way out the door. And that was really important to go, like, we both have to recognize the seriousness of this drift.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember that moment when I saw in her eyes that look of desperation, and the Holy Spirit he gave me the sense to understand, like, how serious this was. This wasn't just another argument, and part of it was because she didn't have the energy to fight. I think that was the sign. Like, I don't want to keep doing this, and I think that broke me, and I could see. And I think for men, it's to understand, like, biblical sorrow is when you realize that someone's experiencing pain, likely due to something you've done. And I think God allowed me to see the ways that I hadn't been meeting a need for her, or working hard enough to figure out how to meet that need, to make sure that she was feeling cared for, loved, understood. And that moment was a turning point. And God used that to I think light a fire under me to say, hey, if you don't pursue this, like, she needs this, she's going to find it somewhere else. If she doesn't find it with you, this is dangerous. This is a danger zone. Her vulnerability now is she needs this connection. And if it's not going to be with you, it could be with someone else. And so I think God used all that to just lead me towards wisdom versus anxiety about it, and say, okay, I'm going to get more serious about my pursuit of learning, of growing, and then pursuing her heart.
Yeah, I tell guys this all the time. You've got to work to be her first choice to talk to share with, to be that safe place for her. And scary, because it does take some time, because most of us didn't experience that growing up. But I think we have to do that for our wives, for her to feel like I can come to him and begin to work at it. And so really, I think that tipping point that you saw in Rebekah, I think I see that in women. I think women try and try and try so hard, but each time we rebuke it or we just walk away, it seems to chip a little bit more at them. And some point, once a woman inside feels she's done, that's hard. And it takes a lot. Then I think the ball does come in our court. I mean, we got to give her some reason to come back, to trust that we're going to work with her on this again, work with it because we haven't done it before. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, my encouragement to women walking through that too is sometimes the man is intimidated by this fact that they just don't see things the same way. They're not feeling it the way that their wife is feeling it. And sometimes it can be very intense for your wife to sit across from you and look you in the eye and have these intense moments. But for Rebekah and I, one of our great habits is to go on walks together, especially if we're discussing something difficult, and just be shoulder to shoulder and walking, and we're not looking each other in the eyes. But I find I'm able to open up just a little bit better when we're in that or side by side in the car. Like this idea of creating some new environments to have conversations, and for the wife to really allow their husband as well to share some of those things that perhaps he's been hiding because he's scared to share how he really feels about the marriage. Because I can guarantee you that husband likely is not satisfied with where things are at, but he may not feel safety to say it for the fear that he's going to lose his wife if he's honest about needs that he has that aren't being met. And so it's really back to both of us creating space and safety for the conversation, not overreacting, and saying, hey, we're going to be patient with one another to work on this, to work towards healing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But God, just don't settle. If it's there and you're just kind of, okay, this is the way it's going to be, fight for it. Right.
Yeah.
Keep working at it.
That's right. That's right.
When you started the Fight for Us, when did you both all in commit to fighting for marriage? Was at that point, what did that happen after that realization? When you saw that in Rebekah's eyes, what happened after that really began the fight for your marriage?
Well, a couple things. The first was me going, I'm going to get serious about more help for me to understand, like on my own, I'm not going to necessarily figure a lot of this out. So that meant counseling. It meant me having a counselor that was committed to our marriage, not making the mistake of just getting a counselor to help me grow individually without a view towards our marriage. We made that very clear up front. And then the journey for me of starting to access emotions, better understand them. Dr. Chip Dodd was a huge help to me in that. His book, Voice of the Heart, we reference it in our book. It was such a helpful tool for me as a man to realize that there's 8 emotions as he lays it out. He simplifies this emotional conversation, and it made it a little more logical to me. Whereas sometimes I thought Rebekah had 100 emotions, given one conversation. And I was like, oh, wait, there's just 8. I can kind of get my head around that. And these emotions are a gift. These emotions aren't meant to be shut down and put away because they just hold me back. It's like, no, God gave us emotions to point us back towards relationship. And the more I could cognitively, again, logic brain for me, access and understand the use of emotions, how God's given them to us as a gift, then that changed my perspective and my hunger to grow. And then the second thing is inviting Rebekah to be patient with me, acknowledging I'm not good at this. This feels very clunky to me, but if you will have the grace, I will attempt to talk to you about the things I'm thinking, feeling. I'll try to share my emotions. And I think both getting the help, but then also risking again, for me was part of what started to make a turn on my side.
Yeah.
Now I was going to say, how did you find somebody to talk to? How did you find your counselor? Because I think a lot of guys is like, well, I probably should get some help. I don't know where to go.
Yeah, the first step is probably asking some trusted people in your world, in your life, perhaps at your local church, for a trusted counselor, because there's not a lot of them, right? That's one of our great challenges today. Is it's hard to get in with a counselor, especially somebody that's qualified for marriage and family. There's a lot of individual therapists these days, and they're kind of dealing with the marriage questions, but they're not necessarily equipped. And so trying to get to a family marriage counselor is a big deal. And for us, a Christian counselor, one that really shares this view of marriage that God's given us, that we share, of covenant commitment, was a big deal as well. And so that'd be my suggestion: is start local, start with trusted people. Unfortunately, there's not just an amazing database that's going to give you everybody that's the most qualified. There's some good sources out there, but I think we have to start with the local.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And your church, I think your church is the first place to start. Sometimes they'll even have lay leaders that have some form of training in marriage and family that can help. Like it's kind of the number one need for a church, a body of Christ, like the household of faith. You're trying to raise a generational church, right? Where you've got healthy parents that are raising secure and stable kids who all want to grow up loving and fearing the Lord. So marriage is the kind of the bedrock of that. And I think churches that don't focus on supporting those marriages, especially when they're young. I remember our very first year of our marriage in Atlanta at our church, there was a newlyweds class. Thank the Lord, because we couldn't afford counseling. And we went every Sunday morning to some form of a Sunday school thing that was led by marriage coaches. And it was groundbreaking for us. We're like, oh, I shouldn't probably tell Gabe how to mow the grass. Like that's probably,
I got it.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm a firstborn of 3 girls, and Gabe's younger. And I just kind of had this, like, I think I know how to do everything well. And that doesn't go so great in marriage. That's not, again, we're talking about how Gabe doesn't relate, things that shouldn't relate in marriage, but women too, strong women. I was raised with a strong female mother who was a survivor herself. And she was just kind of, she was like the marriage, the family ninja. Like she made stuff happen. And even so, that's kind of even what I saw modeled in my parents' marriage. And they both loved the Lord, but she definitely, she led. And I'm wired a lot like her. And it could be normalized for me to go, okay, I'm not sure how I feel about like being your help. Like, I feel like we're going to help each other. You know what I mean? So there was even some humbling that I needed along the way to go, no, God's given you someone who is going to lead, and it's going to test you in some ways in your humility. And it's been so good for me. So we both had to be sharpened and pruned along the way.
No, I think that's such a good point you made, though, about letting go of that. You can't, we spent at least 2 or 3 years trying to change each other into this checklist that we had of what a husband and wife were going to be. And that was really the contention of most of our fights in the early years of marriage, until we went to a counselor, and he kind of showed us how, you work on you and you work on you, and let God develop you into the wife he wants you to be, and me into the husband that God wants me to be. That was a turning point for us, because I not that we didn't still at times try to, because I really know how to do some things better than she does, And so, but yeah, I think it was a turning point. So speaking of how to do things, do you guys have the dishwasher issue?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, we fight about the dishwasher all the time.
It's amazing how common that is. And I think it's just the guys listening, just walk away from the dishwasher. Right? She knows how to load it better.
I know. I didn't know that was a thing. So that's a thing for a lot of couples. Is it what is the tension that you witness with that? Is it like between he and her? Yeah. Describe it. I want to see what ours is.
I would, if there's 7 dishes in there, it's time to start it. And for Nancy, I'll say, honey, it's full. And she'll put 5 or 6 more things in there. So ours usually was not actually how I loaded it, is that there's something dirty in here, let's wash it, like that. Does that make sense?
We literally had this fight the other day, but it's not because it got to where I was like, why don't you pick a this is embarrassing, but like he's making just a single egg for our son before school, and he has a big plate that he gets out for it, and I was like, that's going to take a lot of room in the dishwasher. Why don't you just pick like a little bowl for that one? So
she's telling me I'm about to put the egg on the plate, and she goes, can you just use that little bowl, because that's going to work better in the dishwasher? I'm like, can I not just choose a plate?
And I'm like, but that's going to take a lot of room in that dishwasher.
So we had to work through that. Like, why does she have such a reaction? And I understood, because she's so good at and efficient at loading, and it's more work,
I just don't like dishes piled in the sink. So the more you can fit in the dishwasher, then it at least gives you at least a moment of peace when you walk in the kitchen.
I will say our truce was understanding these are preferences. These are not moral issues. And I think the sooner we started to understand, a lot of fights are just preferences and not moral issues. So we can't just hold each other to the fire that we're getting it wrong.
Right.
And understand on compromise on some of those things. On other things, I'm probably still going to use a plate, because that's the way I like to do breakfast for for my son. And she's going to be okay with it.
It is, and I think it's choosing our battles. And sometimes just letting some things go, because we can do the same thing, and it seems like our wives have more of an, especially in the house, and it has more ideas of how things should be in her way, like she does it. And so during COVID, that was probably the only thing we fought about, because I was home too much in her, I think, in her opinion, so I would do things, trying to help, but I finally realized she'll ask me if she needs my help. And then I told her that. I said, if you want my help, ask me. I will do anything. I'll stand in my head in the corner if that helps. But just letting her be who she is, I think, has helped me a lot. And realizing that if she wants me to use a smaller plate, okay, I can do that. And when she's not here, I can use the big plate. It's no. Yes. So let's talk about the real enemy. We all know that. What did you implement as protection from the enemy? Because as a Christian counselor, I think Christian marriages are a huge target right now for the enemy, and I think we see that in the high profile people that we've seen struggle, all the way down to the guys that come into my office. How do you protect?
Well, a few years ago, we just adopted this phrase in our home because our kids were teenagers and they were exposed to just things through friends or the internet or whatever. And we just had this kind of mantra in our home that, like, no topic is off limits in our home. And we wanted to be a place where it really was initially for our kids that, like, if they just had anything they were wrestling with, anything they were confused about, anything even that the enemy might plant, like intrusive thoughts or anything, like, we're going to be a safe place for them to come and process that with. We'd rather be that us than just their friends, their peers. And as long as, like, they felt that without judgment or condemnation or shame, but we could talk through, what does God say about this, and invite them into that, that would be a freeing place. So it started over dinner with just stuff like that, and it turned into conversations like sex and, just all the things that teenagers are exposed to or wrestle with, and, especially as Christians and wanting to stay pure. And it turned into more of just normalizing, like, conversations that everyone's thinking but not always saying. And so then in turn, it turned into, like, even in our marriage, like, they would ask us questions and we're like, well, we're not telling you everything, but we do want to be honest with, like even our story and our journey, and because they're old enough and mature enough to have some of those conversations. And it turned into even just this kind of way of our marriage just being like, let's just make sure that there's not anything, even in the thought life, anything that might even we just notice with someone else paying attention to one of us, or let's just make sure that there's nothing off limits that we can bring to one another at all times. And that has just created just this safety net for us, to just not have we don't withhold anything from each other. And it could even be like an intrusive thought the enemy plants that we weren't even looking for. And both of us travel for work. I teach in different cities. Gabe teaches in other cities. And so we're always very accountable to each other in how we do that, and engaging anyone from the opposite sex. And it's actually been so healthy, because now we just talk about anything and everything, and there's never any shame, never any rejection. And it's almost just created such a bond with us that we're not even targets right now. I don't want to, like, knock on wood, but it doesn't even feel like that's a temptation at all, because we just feel so safe with one another to just share anything that we might be exposed to or wrestling with, or anything.
Yeah, when you expose things quickly and just on your own, it just creates a confessional type of relationship that's trusting and healthy and good. And I would say, just final thought on that is just understanding at the macro level what you said. The enemy's after marriages. He wants to destroy this union. He wants to alter the way our children think about marriage and destroy lines of generations. I mean, it's a big deal. I know in our marriages, we don't always carry the weight of that. We shouldn't carry the weight of that, but we got to understand what you said, that this is a target that the enemy's never going to stop. That's why it's years of commitment to one another. And it's years of understanding you overcome through your testimony, and you overcome by remembering the ways God's healed and brought you together, and never letting the enemy start to build in your mind, like some account of why your spouse is always wrong, why they are the problem, why you'd be better off without them. Those kind of accusations and lies, when you make agreement with them, you are now participating in his plan. And so we try to, in this book, really dispel why your spouse is not the enemy and why the only thing really that you can work on is yourself, and change the equation, how the relationship works, allow God to be in the middle of that, inviting him into the conversation. Sometimes we reckon I've had disagreements. We don't know the answer. And it's as simple as saying, can we just pray about this? And it sounds cheesy or corny, but it's actually been the resolve to many issues to just say, I don't know the answer. I feel pressure to know the answer, to give you the right answer, to say what you want me to say, but I don't feel the same conviction. I don't feel 100% that direction. So can we just invite God into it? And I think that helps both of us just realize, like, look, God's the one who can help us work through this topic, even when we don't have the words for it.
Right. Even to feel the distance, right? So say, it doesn't have to be some big confession of like, I had a thought that I don't like, I didn't invite. It could be just like, hey, I feel distant right now. Like we've been traveling, or we have a lot of caregiving. We have 2 children with special needs. Our oldest is 24. We adopted a little girl who's 12. They both have a Down syndrome diagnosis. So we're full nesting with these 2 full time. So you can definitely distract yourself with like caregiving and calendar and kids. But if we're not honest, even in the day to day of going like, hey, I miss you. Like, I feel a little disconnected. Like, let's just like pause everything and just, and reset. Because that might even make us, if we're tired or irritable, we could be a little on edge with the way we talk. If we just address it and not just let it go and linger, the enemy dwells in the secret. So he wants us to just, when we feel those things, retreat, right? Like, again, shame makes us hide. So if we feel like something's off, but we don't have the courage to just go, are we okay? Like, is there something going on? That just pokes the air out of the balloon. So you can at least reset and just recenter and go, no, maybe we're just tired. I just want to make sure we're not like, there's not something underlying that we're not discussing.
That's so good. Nancy, I can't remember when we started, but we started when we've both been away, even during the day, to come home and just first thing is that, how are you? And so if one of us is tired or one of us is frustrated because not at the other person, but maybe something happened out there, I think it really helps, because then we don't start making assumptions of he or she is mad, or they don't like this or something else, which we can do. And then the enemy is going to grab that if we let him and escalate it. So I think we always have to be on guard, and know that I think we all are vulnerable, and we have to realize that, that the enemy will take care of that. Anytime we feel like we're not vulnerable, we'll get in trouble. Yeah, for sure. A huge part of intimacy is how you connect outside the bedroom. How can couples learn to talk more, not just children, not just finance, not just work, more meaningful connections? Because I have couples that say, well, we want to, but we don't know what we sat down on the couch and we stared at each other for 5 minutes, and then we thought, well, this isn't working. So how do we get there?
I know one of the things I've learned just to practice is to ask Rebekah how she's feeling about any particular subject, topic, relationship, how something made her feel that maybe we experienced during the day. That's always an open door conversation that allows her to access a little more heart and to help me hear a little more of what's going on. Because as you just said, lots of times the things going on have nothing to do with me. But if I think it could do with me, or I'm feeling defensive, it's just going to start off a cycle that's not healthy. So that's one thing that I try to do.
Yeah. I think we were talking about the 8 primary feelings. They're all, they splinter off into more specific ways, but just knowing there's 8 primary emotions or feelings that we've kind of like, those are on our radar now. Like, I'm like, I feel gladness, right? Like glad. That's the positive one. But some might be, I feel lonely, or I feel sad, or I feel hurt or fearful. It's nice to just go, just to kind of get that theme out there, at least to go. And I'm trying to unpack why, because there's sometimes I feel things and I don't know why I'm feeling them. And so then even in that conversation, I'd be like, I feel a little sad about like that our kids are not in this city because they're in 2 different cities, right now. but I know it's like a good thing. They're with the people that they love, they should be, but it's okay to just like feel the freedom to just say something and share that burden and bear it together in love, and it lifts.
Yeah, my knee jerk reaction usually though is I don't want her to feel sad, so I try to solve that. Like most guys, we want to solve that. Well, we can do that. Let's go visit the kids, or let's call them right now on FaceTime. That's not what she's going for. She just wants me to understand in her heart there's this loss. There's something missing that I'm not going to be able to resolve, and that's okay. I would say in my weakness area, I would feel insecure about that. Like I should be able to resolve everything for her so she never feels sad, because when she feels sad, then I feel like I'm sad. And I don't want to feel sad, right? so we get into this cycle, and if we can just kind of understand, like that's not her need at the moment. It's not about me. It's about her being able to express what she's feeling and to lean on me as her husband and share and cast that burden on me as a stronger, perhaps in that moment, emotional like rock for her. She needs to feel the safety of that. And so that's been a practice that I still have to practice. I don't always get that right.
No, it's so good, because our tendency is to fix. Mine too, because I want to make her okay, just like you were saying. But I found that, and we did pretty much better now, but we kind of got where she would just say, I just need you to listen to me right now, or I just need you to hold me. And that was so freeing for me, because then I could just do what she really needed at that time, instead of jumping through hoops trying to get, fix it.
Sometimes we need our wives to just tell us what they need, right? That would make life simpler. So wives, if you're listening, just tell us like we're a third grader, and keep it simple for us.
Yeah, because whoever started the myth, and I think it's dying out, thank goodness, is that we can't read each other's minds. If you really love me, you can read my mind, but that's not true. Now, I think the longer you're together, you know each other. And so I know what kind of toothpaste she's going to buy if she goes to buy toothpaste or something. But there's a lot of things that go in her mind that I want her to tell me, so I can come alongside her in it. Really, really good. Couple more questions. What about the couples who feel stuck? They're listening. They're thinking, golly, Gabe and Rebekah really fought through some things. They've done so well. Where do they begin?
Well, I know for us, we read marriage books. We did. If we couldn't afford counseling and we didn't have a therapist lined up, we just were like, okay, we want to, what some books our friends are recommending that are fighting for marriage, that are Christian based. And so we read a lot of those books. And I just, this isn't a plug for our book, but it definitely, whatever book out there that has been a tool and a resource, I would go through that together and just have the conversation with your spouse. Just say, hey, I do feel a little disconnected. Maybe you do too. Could we do something like this together? It doesn't have to be a big deep dive pressure, but if you're feeling stuck, you probably need some assistance. And people who've kind of painstakingly gone there with writing about it is the first place to go. I mean, I've learned about all of life through reading books. It has been such a key pivotal thing for me, and it's not an expensive investment. It just takes some time. And our book, like Gabe said, has these conversations for couples at the end of every chapter. They've been vetted and edited by many people, gone through a lot of different rounds, because we really wanted them to be accessible and easy and approachable, especially for people trying for the first time.
Yeah, that's so good. Because I think, for couples, a book like yours, you need to go through it as a couple. It needs to be the two of you going through it, so you can do the questions together.
Yeah, and we try to do it in a way that my voice is there, represented, right? And that was the hard part about writing this book together, but also I think the gift of it is being able to represent how men are feeling in the relationship, as well as her representing how she's feeling and how we've come together in those things. And so we hope that it can be a resource. Now, the cover of our book, if you haven't seen it, is beautiful, colorful. I think women are going to love it. For men, they probably aren't going to go pick that book up right away. But order it on Amazon, get the book, because I designed a cover inside that little slip cover that's for men. So if they take that slip cover off, they're going to find a book they're happy to carry on the airplane or wherever they're going as they're trying to work on their marriage.
Exactly. So the book is out. For both of you, what's one takeaway that you would want couples to have? And maybe Rebekah, yours more for the couples, but Gabe, you as a husband, what for men?
Well, I'll say for men, the big turning point for me was 1 Peter 3:7, when I really understood God's instruction to a husband that said, look, cherish your wife, cherish her, and your prayers won't be hindered. And I knew in my life, like there were prayers I was praying that felt hindered, felt like they were kind of hitting the ceiling. And when I understood biblically, this is the one time in scripture where we're told your prayers literally aren't reaching me because I'm watching how you're treating your wife. And if I can't trust you with how you're treating her, I'm not going to trust you with more. And that was so convicting and continues to be a great motivation in me. Like, God's watching. He cares how I cherish her. And I think for every husband out there to recognize, it doesn't mean your wife's always going to say the things you want her to say. You know, they're not always going to meet every need you have in the moment that you think you need it. But God's not necessarily requiring that of them, but he is requiring of you to make sure you're in an understanding way trying to show up with them and care for them and cherish them. And he's watching. And I think that's a great motivation.
I would just say no marriage is too far gone, because repentance is real and the cross and the resurrection is real. And if both parties are willing to just say, hey, I have not been doing this well. I feel so lost. I feel discouraged, defeated even, but I am willing to try. Then that's your first step. You know, you both need to be willing to try, and then just make that rhythm of confession, like we talked about earlier, a practice. Like, you can confess without shame. You can just confess because you want to be free. And if you just kind of have this cycle, a reciprocal relationship where you're both going, I don't know how to do this. I haven't done this well. But instead of living under that condemnation, just let the conviction help you confess and move forward. And then that repair begins to happen one day at a time.
Yeah, that's so good. Final question. What are you guys loving about your marriage right now, the stage you're in?
We're loving playing together.
Yeah.
I think that's been a fun feature these last few years, is just finding these new hobbies and recreation. So Rebekah picked up golf, which I've loved
Go
golf,
figure.
and she's great at it. And so we get to go out with our two kiddos that are with us and enjoy 9 holes some evenings. And that's fun. Pickleball, hiking, walking. I mean, just activities. I think in our 50s now, we both just turned 50. It's like activity is a big deal. It's probably our full-time job is to stay active.
Try to keep our bodies healthy.
So trying to just find those ways we can do that together has been a fun part.
And also at home, like in the kitchen, we share a lot of things. Like, I might be directing traffic on the recipe, but Gabe's right next to me. He's like, tell me what to chop, or, you know, it's just
I'm
kind
our
of
sous
fun.
chef in
He
the
is
kitchen
definitely the sous
sometimes,
chef.
which I never wanted to do and never liked doing, but
he's
found
pretty good at it.
It's good. It helps her. It's fun. I'm learning. And so finding things to just do together, I think, has been the fun part for our marriage right now.
Yeah, because the opportunities are there every day, and sometimes we just kind of walk by them. We don't chop this whatever celery. We go sit in front of the TV. And if we chop the celery, it's just going to make our lives better and our marriages better. You guys, this has been so much fun. I'm excited about the book. It's available everywhere, The Fight for Us. I know it's going to help so many people. So thanks for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having us. It's been a joy.
Yeah, thank you.